Hello everyone, happy Friday. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin in Gaza today. That's where sporadic violence between Israel and the Palestinians have escalated sharply. At least 5 Palestinians were shot dead by Israeli troops, and the leader of Hamas has called for the strengthening of a new intifada. Palestinian demonstrators were shot at as they marched on Gaza's eastern border fence with Israel. One witness said the Israeli soldiers first used rubber-coated bullets and stun grenades, then live ammunition. In addition to those killed, at least 25 others were wounded.
The Israeli occupation forces were taking position far from us, and we moved toward them throwing stones. From the watchtower, snipers shot at some youths.
The senior leader of Hamas in Gaza, Ismail Haniyeh, has called the wave of protests a new intifada. Speaking at Friday prayers in Gaza City, he called for the movement to be stepped up as the only way to achieve liberation.
The Battle of Jerusalem is our battle, and the intifada in the West Bank is our nation's intifada. We will not be late to be in the right place as always, and to always do the right action in support of our nation.
Palestinians and other protesters also clashed with police in Jordan as anger mounts across the region over Israel's restrictions on access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem. The clashes erupted after the demonstrators attempted to walk towards the Israeli embassy but were stopped by police, and some protesters were detained.
We send a clear message to the Jordanian government that its duty is to fulfill its responsibility as a custodian of the Al-Aqsa Mosque by taking a stern and clear position towards the Zionist actions that target Al-Aqsa and their attempts to spatially and periodically divide it.
For more now on this escalating tension there in the region, we're joined by our correspondent Noor Harazin, joining us live from Gaza. Noor, we now hear that at least 5 Palestinians have been killed in 2 separate incidents in Gaza, and that there's been even more violence elsewhere. What's the latest there?
Well, yes, Cody, the number now is up to 6 Palestinian youth killed and over 30 injuries. What happened is shortly after Friday prayers, Palestinian youth gathered in groups around the Gaza Strip, marched towards the border, and then clashes started between the Palestinian youth and Israeli soldiers. As you said, the Israeli soldiers started firing rubber and live bullets toward the protesters, which resulted in killing the Palestinians. The death toll in the Gaza Strip now is up to 6 Palestinians killed and over 30 injured. Regarding the West Bank, clashes continue in different cities around the West Bank, and the death toll is up to at least 8 Palestinians killed in the past 5 days and over 400 injuries.
This appears to sort of been triggered by Israel's action around the Al-Aqsa Mosque there in East Jerusalem. Can you sort of explain for us here what the dispute is around that mosque?
Have been happening since 1967, and nothing changed. But what changed recently is that the settlers started attacking by themselves the Palestinian Muslim worshippers inside Al-Aqsa Mosque and around the Palestinian-occupied city of Holy Jerusalem. So this kind of action by the Israeli settlers enraged Palestinian youth to clash and launch attacks on Israeli settlers around the Palestinian holy city of Jerusalem.
And briefly here, Noor, Ismail Haniyeh, the top leader of Hamas there, he seems to be calling this an intifada, which would sort of be a strong statement. That's the name, of course, given to 2 previous Palestinian uprisings. Could this really be developing, as he suggested, into a 3rd intifada?
Well, yes, most of the Palestinian people here on the ground, even the officials, are expecting a 3rd intifada, because the first intifada and the second intifada, the Palestinian uprisings, started the same way, clashes between Palestinian youth and Israeli forces in the West Bank and in Gaza, and then it went bigger to an intifada. So everyone is expecting a 3rd intifada. However, here on the ground, you can find some people in Gaza who would not love for Gaza to be dragged to a new intifada or a new war, because Now it have been a year since the last Israeli offensive on Gaza, protective edge operation, and until now, there's 100,000 Palestinian people displaced, homeless. There is lack of medicine, medical supplies. So the people of Gaza will not hope for a third intifada.
All right, Noor Harazin reporting for us from Gaza. Noor, we know you'll continue to follow the latest on what is an escalating situation there in the region. Noor, thanks so much. We'll move on. As I was saying, we move on. The 42nd cycle of the peace talks in Havana, Cuba between the FARC and the Colombian government have been extended one more day due to a disagreement over the interpretation of the two agreed upon, of the text the two agreed upon 2 weeks ago on transnational transitional justice. The government representatives have requested another meeting with legal advisors to work out the differences. Now, they want to focus on several points they claim are undefined, such as extradition, kidnapping, and the selection of judges in a special court. Now, the FARC leadership is not happy with this move. They maintain the agreement on justice is a done deal.
The story of the creation of peace is written by fulfilling commitments. The Commission of Legal Advisors fulfilled their word. We fulfill our word. We are still waiting for what was signed to be accepted without hesitation.
And while the FARC insists the agreement should not be discussed further and instead published, it instead published in full, the government lead negotiator Humberto de la Calle disagrees.
There was an agreement embodied in 10 points, but for the longer document, we never ever accept that it will be a close and unchangeable agreement.
And for more on the setback now, we're going to go to Natalia Margarita from Colombia. Natalia, thanks for joining us. Can just run through it here. What exactly happened here, and what is the disagreement, this argument about?
Well, this recent agreement on transitional justice that all the world got to know on the 23rd of September is an agreement of 75 points. However, what we got to know and what we actually know at this point is just 10 out of those 75 points, Cody. So basically, the FARC has been insisting that the full agreement, the 75 points that are part of this agreement, should be published, fully published. And on the other side, the government disagrees with publishing this agreement, as they argue, the Colombian government is arguing that there are many points among those 75 that still need to be discussed and agreed. So particularly, the government has been insisting that 5 points still need to be discussed in depth. Those 5 points has to do with kidnapping crimes, with the issue of extradition, with the conditions of restriction of freedom. Let's remember that among the agreement is that there is going to be alternative sentence to prison, alternatives to prison. So which are going to be these alternatives exactly? The treatment that state agents that are found guilty, which treatment they are going to receive. And finally, the mechanisms to choose the judges that are going to be part of the so-called Tribunal for Peace. So these 5 points, according to the government, still need to be discussed. And that's why the government does not agree and has rejected the proposal of the FARC to publish this agreement yet. So basically, that is the difference that they have been having since yesterday there in Havana, Cody.
And Natalia, throughout the course of these peace talks, there have been times when it has appeared that real progress was being made, and then we've also watched seen times when there were real setbacks. So how serious of a setback is this latest disagreement?
I wouldn't call it a setback at all, Cody. I think it's just a couple of differences that has more to do with the way and not really the content. You know what I mean? They are disagreeing on whether to publish an agreement or not publish it yet, the full agreement, the 75 points that I was mentioning before, but it's not something really of content that they are really disagreeing on. And if you have a look overall, the whole peace process, the 3 years that these conversations have been lasting since the November 2012 when they start, they have really advanced. They have already reached agreements on 4 of the 5 points of the negotiation agenda. And also is the fact that this peace process has advanced much further than any other previous peace process here in Colombia. So I believe this is not going to be anything serious, and they have been holding also today some conversations to discuss this difference that they had yesterday on this regard, Cody.
All right, let's certainly hope that it's not a setback. Natalia Margarita reporting on the latest on those peace talks from Colombia. Natalia, thanks.
Good day, Cody.
And as those talks continue in Havana, the leftist Patriotic Union of Colombia took to the streets on Thursday to remember the thousands of members assassinated in the 1980s in the wake of a previous peace agreement. Now, among those murdered was their presidential candidate, Jaime Pardo.
They have always believed in a political solution to the armed conflict. Their party, the Patriotic Union, was itself the result of peace negotiations between guerrillas and the government back in the 80s. The violence from paramilitaries and security forces that would later lead to the extermination of this party has not prevented its survivors from struggling for peace.
That is the legacy the Patriotic Union has left, and now revives within another peace process in which we hope and struggle for the materialization of a peace project with social justice, of a fair, democratic, and inclusive peace.
The recent agreement on justice reached in Havana has particularly brought hope to the victims of the Patriotic Union that for decades have been seeking for truth and justice. That's the case of Marlene, whose son was forcibly disappeared in 2002.
I hope someone brings me back my son alive, but if he's already dead, they must tell me the truth. Where can I find him? Where have they left him? What have they done to him, and why did they take him? I wonder what I've done to be tortured in this way. I've been waiting for my son for 14 years, which is certainly a torture.
In the wake of the current peace process, truth has come as a pressing issue for the victims, not only for its importance in terms of healing, but also because it's the way towards clarifying responsibilities and preventing these kind of episodes from happening again.
The core of this peace agreement is the recognition of the truth, and the truth implied not just to know who was the hitman or the paramilitary that pulled the trigger, but also who financed, who promoted, and who gave the orders, which are the politicians, business people, and sectors of military forces that were involved too.
The symbolic installation is aimed to keep in this country's memory the political genocide against the Patriotic Union. Each of these white shirts represent the 6,000 victims of the political violence against this leftist party. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
We'll go to Central America. Former Guatemalan dictator Efraín Rios Montt, who is facing a second trial on genocide, has been denied amnesty by the Court of Appeals. Now, Rios Montt had asked for amnesty to avoid the second trial for his responsibility in the massacre of over 1,700 Mayan exiles in the north of the country between 1982 and 1983. He was found guilty in 2013 and sentenced to 80 years in jail, but the ruling was revoked by the Constitutional Court for alleged errors in the process and has to be repeated. Now, his lawyers have achieved prolonging the new hearing for several years now. He will now face a trial in absentia to start on January 11th of next year. However, the dictator will not be sent to jail. And we're joined now by our correspondent for Central America, Gerardo Torres, on the line for more on that decision. Gerardo, this was just the last attempt of Rios Montt and his lawyers there to keep delaying this trial. Can we say this decision is a success for the victims?
Well, definitely the decision to suspend their immunity is a good step for Guatemalan justice. Rios Montt was trying to apply an amnesty based on the law of 1986. But there was a different law of those approved in 1986 when the peace agreement was signed. this means that he couldn't use impunity when he was accused of genocide and abuses to human rights. Now, the victims of the family victims of all those people that were killed and tortured during his regime when he was the dictator of Guatemala will now have another chance to pray for justice. He has finished all the possibilities of getting immunity, and now he will have to face trial, and maybe he will have a sentence of 80 years or even more, because now he has new applications that have been adding up since the trial was suspended 2 years ago.
All right, Gerardo Torres reporting on the latest there out of Guatemala. Gerardo, thank you very much. And we go to South America now, here to Venezuela. Venezuela will file a report with the UN after what it says are attempts at deception by Guyana's president, David Granger. Now, Granger recently claimed a Venezuelan military ship was seen off the Guyanese coast. During his meeting with Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Granger gave Ban a book he authored called Caribbean Politics, whose cover depicts a military ship, which the book claims is a Venezuelan warship in Georgetown, the capital there in Guyana. However, according to Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez of Venezuela, it is a Venezuelan patrol boat built in Spain, and the picture was taken in the Spanish Canary Islands.
I never thought we would have to witness an atrocity like this, in which one lies to the Secretary General of the United Nations in such a shameless and barbaric way.
And Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro also condemned Guyana for not recognizing the 1966 Geneva Accord that establishes a joint committee to decide on the dispute between the two countries. He also reiterated his willingness to solve the disagreement diplomatically.
The Geneva Accord must rule in all the process of Venezuela's historical demand over the Essequibo region. President David Granger does not recognize the Geneva Accord. He does not recognize the international law. We hope that he rectifies his posture sooner than later, because it damages the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, which is a brother people, and disturbs the relation and creates unneeded tensions in our South America, in our Caribbean America.
It has been a bad week for Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. She met with her new cabinet on Thursday evening after the audit court declared the government's accounts for the year 2014 illegal. Now, the ruling comes on top of another one by the Electoral Court, which ordered a probe into alleged irregularities in Rousseff's 2014 re-election campaign. Now, in addition to this, Rousseff failed on Wednesday to gather enough votes to sustain her vetoes on important budget laws. All these situations hand ammunition to opponents who seek her impeachment, but her brand new chief of staff has praised the president's strength.
President Rousseff is a warrior. She does very well precisely in difficult situations. Clearly, she would have preferred a different result from the audit court analysis, but she took the decision with respect, and she understands that we have to turn the page and fight the battle at judgment time, which will happen at Congress.
Also in Brazil now, ALBA social movements gathered in Sao Paulo to launch an anti-imperialist conference that will start on November 1st. Now, the attendees debated the continent's current challenges on popular struggle. During the event, they remembered the People's Summit held in Mar del Plata, Argentina, which rejected the U.S.-dominated free trade area of the Americas proposal. That was thanks to late Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and former Brazilian President Luis Inácio da Silva. And we stay in Sao Paulo now. Hundreds of taxis blocked the city hall on Thursday in another protest against that phone application, Uber. The city's mayor there plans to issue 5,000 permits for a new class of taxis called black cabs, which will transfer passengers using the Uber service. The bill is not to the liking of the taxi drivers nor Uber itself, which does not want to be classified as a taxi service. Bolivia is hosting the second World People's Conference on Climate Change this weekend, and the president there, Evo Morales, says the country will push for far-reaching measures to tackle the problem. The UN's Ban Ki-moon will join 8,000 delegates from more than 40 countries at the event. Our correspondent now, Dimitri Oldano, reports from the capital, La Paz.
Our planet is getting warmer, and scientists say this is because of climate change. On the congested streets of La Paz, bumper-to-bumper traffic is contributing to the greenhouse gas effect, and this is the hot topic at the People's Climate Change Conference taking place in Bolivia this weekend.
You can see the change that the variable weather generates, like more frost, more rain, less rain, and even drought in the different regions.
Environmental activists are calling on developed countries to pay their climate debt. For its part, Bolivia wants to stop deforestation, but first it has to improve its own record.
In the case of Bolivia, more than 66% of the greenhouse gas emissions of Bolivia come from deforestation. So if we want to fight against climate change in Bolivia, we have to halt deforestation.
In La Paz, there's huge excitement about a soccer qualifier for the next World Cup. But Bolivia is also hoping to score in another way by persuading nations to sign up to climate change reform.
It's important as well to think about Mother Earth, that we have as human beings a responsibility with Mother Earth. And I think that's going to be the most important contribution of the Tiquipaya too.
Bolivia says it wants to defend Mother Earth and is asking every nation attending the Cochabamba conference to do the same. Proposals to combat climate change will be discussed and put forward at the Paris Environmental Summit at the end of the year. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
And we stay in Bolivia now, where relatives of femicide victims are denouncing the impunity enjoyed by many of the perpetrators and the murderers there, and the failure of the state to protect women. Now, according to official statistics, there have been 40 cases of femicide in the first half of 2015 alone in the country. Last year, President Morales enacted a law to fight gender violence, but it's facing obstacles like extremely long trials that open up possibilities for manipulation, while high costs deter women from following through with their accusations. The Mexican Senate has questioned President Enrique Peña Nieto for several scandals, including those related with corruption and with the escape of the drug lord El Chapo. Now, in an unprecedented move, the upper house sent the president 38 questions about controversial domestic affairs. These relate to his education reforms, justice, and the so-called White House scandal, the Pemex privatization, the relations with the United States, and the deteriorated image and reputation of Mexico around the world, which the spectacular escape of El Chapo has certainly not improved upon. Now, Peña Nieto has 15 days now to reply. Members of the group of 24 developing economies called the G24, who are in Lima, Peru for the IMF and World Bank Summit, say they want better international representation. Now, the group's aim is to coordinate the position of developing countries on monetary and development issues.
Okay.
I want to know if in the meeting with the minister
ha pasado mucho tiempo desde que estas instituciones fueron creadas y los países emergentes y en desarrollo han ganado relevancia en el producto mundial y la deben tener también en la...
Our correspondent in Lima now, Raúl Mora, has more on the IMF's and the World Bank's annual meeting.
Finance authorities from around the world are visiting Peru this week for the annual meeting of the IMF and the World Bank. The heads of those organizations insisted that the work they're doing is producing positive results.
While we remain confident about ending extreme poverty, the final stretch will be extremely difficult because we're in the midst of a period of slow growth, the end of the commodity supercycle, pending interest rate hikes, and the continued flight of capital out of emerging markets. After a decade of strong growth and tremendous social progress, Latin America, like other regions, is facing headwinds.
Even without considering the current economic crisis, many common Peruvians have questioned the alleged success of those financial institutions. Máxima Acuña is one of those, and she has become a symbol of protest against the development plans implemented in Peru and the recommendation of the World Bank and the IMF. Yanacocha, the U.S. mining company which has tried to invade her land, received $83 million from the World Bank, and he pays Peruvian police to do tasks.
For the police to hit us, to mistreat us, for there to be hundreds of police officers in our homes, in our properties, grabbing us, kidnapping us, campesinos. That's probably what the money from the World Bank has given them. What other reason could it be? And what development is there in Cajamarca? They want to destroy our land.
Acuña is from Cajamarca, one of the regions which has had high foreign investment in mining and has contributed to the GDP growth of Peru. That growth has prompted the World Bank and the IMF to call Peru their success story. Cajamarca remains, however, one of the poorest areas in Peru, with close to 50% of its population under the poverty line. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
And at the same time as the IMF and World Bank Summit, an alternative meeting is also taking place there in Lima. Its organizers took to the streets this morning to protest against the big monetary organizations. Our correspondent Rael Mora was also there.
Despite having no permit, a march started today at 10:30 a.m. under the banner "Belying the Peruvian Miracle," organized by an array of organizations which are part of an alternative conference to the IMF and World Bank annual meeting. The protesters plan to march for 8 kilometers from downtown Lima to the location where the World Bank and the IMF meeting is taking place. Those participating include the largest national labor union coalition called CGTP, the National Agrarian Confederation, and the youth movements such as the Zones, the Leftist Youth Forum, and the hip-hop activist bloc, who defeated a law that attempted to cut labor rights for young people as prescribed by the foreign financial organizations gathered in Lima. The goals of the march are to call attention to how the Peruvian model, that is the poster child of the IMF and the World Bank, has caused ongoing social conflicts that resulted in 94 civilian deaths in the last 5 years and has not resolved the grave problems with education, health, security, and income distribution in the country. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
Libya has finally formed a national unity government. Now, this was announced late Thursday evening by the United Nations envoy for the African country. Now, the announcement comes after months of negotiations between the country's two rival administrations. The agreement promises to bring peace to a country that has been torn apart by civil war since 2011. The new national government will be headed by Prime Minister Faiz El-Sarraj. United States actor and activist Sean Penn is in Peru as well, attending the IMF summit, where he took the opportunity to speak to young entrepreneurs there. Now, according to Penn, it is possible for young entrepreneurs in developing countries to achieve their dreams due to greater connectivity across the world.
What does that tell me about the climate for entrepreneurs? The climate for entrepreneurs is that because of interconnectivity, because of the hunger, and now the exposure and the ability for people around the world and in these developing countries to have access to what dreams may be, it is probably the greatest moment of opportunity for young entrepreneurs.
That's what we're covering on this Friday afternoon here from Caracas. Plenty more on all those stories at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.
Una carta del compañero Ernesto Guevara.
Fidel, siento que he cumplido la parte de mi deber que me ataba a la revolución cubana en su territorio y me despido de ti, de los compañeros, de tu pueblo, que es ya mío. Otras tierras del mundo reclaman el concurso de mis modestos esfuerzos. En los nuevos campos de batalla llevaré la fe que me inculcaste, el espíritu revolucionario de mi pueblo, la sensación de cumplir con el más sagrado de los deberes, luchar contra el imperialismo donde quiera que esté una vez más que si me llega la hora definitiva bajo otros cielos, mi último pensamiento será para este pueblo y especialmente para ti. Que no dejo a mis hijos ni mujer nada material y no me apena. Que no pido nada para ellos, pues el Estado les dará lo suficiente para vivir y educar. Hasta la victoria siempre, patria o muerte. Te abraza con todo fervor revolucionario que